Well, good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome to the morning show. Are you wide awake? Well, what do you know? Anyway, last night it was my great pleasure and my great honor to be part of the 2022 California Masonic Symposium, which was a Zoom type event, but a very large one. And I appeared as a panelist with some very wonderful luminaries of Masonic lore, including my good friend Timothy Hogan. And it was I appeared in a panel discussion of esoteric masonry and the importance of esoteric masonry, gee, it was quite fun. Over the years, I've been a Mason now for 25 years or more. And over the years, it's been my great pleasure and, again, my great honor to be asked to speak at official events and more unofficial, under-the-radar type events of Masonic brothers and stuff. And back in 2004, I was asked to address a group of esoteric Masons. And while I'm in this Masonic mood here, I thought I would share my address to that group. And it's called Ritual Work, Memory Work, and the Fear of Death in Public Speaking. And an address to his Masonic brothers by Lon Milo DuQuette, 32nd degree. So I may this may spill over until tomorrow, but we'll see. So, but I hope you enjoy it. There's nothing proprietary. I'm not going to give away Masonic signs or words or grips, anything like that. So don't think. Anyway, prologue. I was raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason in 1998. At the lodge that absorbed the lodge that absorbed the lodge that absorbed the lodge of my father's old lodge in Long Beach, California. I came to Masonry at the age of 50, after spending half of those years enmeshed in the studies, practices, and intrigues of esoteric orders whose names and reputations I'm sure are familiar to many of you. I wasn't seeking in Masonry the same sort of esoteric titillation that spiced one's initiatory adventures in these others more secret societies. No, I had few naive expectations. I knew from the beginning that I was joining an organization of mostly elderly men with whom I would have little in common except the bonds of fidelity that for centuries have united the fraternity. Men who, if they really got to know me, would most likely consider my interests too strange, my politics too subversive, my morals too permissive, my books too weird, and my spiritual worldview downright heretical. Men who, for the most part, chose not to delve too deeply into mysteries that lie in the symbols and ceremonies that they and those that came before them have so dutifully preserved. My expectations were low, and so I wasn't at all disappointed. I was welcomed into a lodge that boasted nearly 1,000 members, whose average age was 72. A lodge whose tiny library contained only a handful of books relating to the esoteric foundations of Masonry, none of which, according to the sign-out sheet, had ever been checked out. It really didn't bother me. As a matter of fact, it felt good. For the first time in many years, I was again the youngster in the group. I quickly grew to love and enjoy the company of my new brothers, and came to the comfortable realization that Masonry was a very big tent, and that if I behaved myself, there was a place in that tent for me. So what if these guys could care less about the Eleusinian mysteries, Sumerian magic, or Kabbalah? So what if they said things like, "Oh, that doesn't mean anything, it's just symbolic"? I was just grateful for the fact that they and generations of others had preserved the craft, and they were now delivering it safely to me across time, like a gift from the unknown adepts of antiquity. On the evening I was raised, I found myself arrogantly wallowing in these narcissistic musings as I sat and listened to a 78-year-old retired naval admiral call me brother and deliver, without a single memory lapse, the long form of the master's lecture. I was not so much impressed by the words of the lecture as I was the fact that this old salt could rattle them off without a hitch. I then recalled that all three of my degree ceremonies, all the officers had delivered their lines and played their parts perfectly. As the old boy continued his monumental lecture, I drifted, hypnotized on the tedious waves of his monotone delivery, and began to replay in my mind the landmark events of the degree ceremonies. My eyes darted back and forth to the officers in the east, to the sideliners, to the secretary. They were all moving their lips. I felt like I was in that old Star Trek episode in which the crew found themselves on a planet where everyone was of the body. I realized at that moment that most of these old coots knew the lecture by heart and could probably give it back in their sleep. In their sleep, I thought. Then I had a Masonic epiphany. Like all illuminations in my life, this realization came as a complete surprise, and at a moment that seemed timed by the gods to administer to me the maximum dose of ego-crunching chastisement. In a lightning flash, my patronizing, esoteric smugness was turned to ashes. I realized for the first time what was for these guys the master's work. That the underlying formula, the exoteric transformational magic of Masonry, was not to be found so much in the traditions, or the symbols, or the lectures, or what was being said or done during the ceremonies per se. No, Important as all those things are, they're only aspects of the craft that attracted and enlightened only a few handful of men in the big tent of Masonry. The fundamental mystery is much more personal, much more profound and universal. It's found in the initiatory method itself, and if mastered, can provide even the most unmystically inclined the key to overcoming death. Part 1. Death and Public Speaking. I've entitled this morning's talk, Ritual Work, Memory Work, and the Fear of Death and Public Speaking. I know that sounds a little goofy, and I do get a little goofy from time to time, but in this case I'm being very serious. Deadly serious, as a matter of fact. And we are told that death is an important subject of meditation for Masons. Surveys show that many people fear something else even more than death: public speaking. This would suggest that, at least on a subjective level, that people who overcome the fear of public speaking have a leg up also on overcoming the fear of death. Masonry requires each of her initiates to overcome the dread demon of public speaking. As ritual officers, we're required to deliver our lines before a knowledgeable and ruthless audience. Men who grimace and shake their heads in exaggerated disappointment each time we flub a word or forget a section. Even if we never choose to be a ritual officer, we're still required, before we're allowed to pass to the next degree, to give back in front of the assembled brethren the carefully memorized words, steps, signs, tokens of our degree proficiencies. The only escape from this terror is to be letter perfect and proud of it. And oh, does it feel so good when it's over. Perhaps death is like that. It feels so good when it's over. Now, I'm not expecting anyone to believe that pulling a tour of duty with Toastmasters International is the secret to immortality. However, I am suggesting such training can have a profound effect upon a person's self-image and ability to project and behave proactively in a strange and sometimes uncomfortable environment. Carrying that a step further, we may speculate that the strangest and most uncomfortable environment imaginable is the death coma itself. And who seem to be obsessed with death and the afterlife journey more than the Egyptians? Now, I confess I've never been to Egypt, never spent a night in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid at Giza, never gazed upon the Sphinx or rode a camel to the Valley of the Kings. However, I've always suffered from a severe case of chemnophilia. Living in Southern California with its warm, dry climate, palm-lined streets, lilies of the Nile, and pampas grass, it's always been easy for me to daydream a shirtless, shoeless life of an Egyptian artisan or scribe or priest. Since I was a child, I've mused that perhaps in a previous incarnation I lived along the Nile or served the gods in some great temple complex. Perhaps my mummy still lies undisturbed in some undiscovered necropolis, or else has been pulverized by 19th century European imperialists and sold as a miracle laxative. I think that it was MacGregor Mather's first job at the Horniman Museum. Mummy laxative sales. MacGregor, I'm sorry. Okay. Why are we as Masons so fascinated with the Egyptians? After all, there's no shortage of ancient civilizations for us to ponder. What's wrong with the Hittites? I have to, for some reason, my dad said, I'm digressing, excuse me. My dad was a very scientific guy. He was a geologist, and he was a Freemason, but he was pretty much an agnostic, if it came right down to it. But anyway, as rational as he was, he always had like 2 or 3 stupid superstitions. And he would joke about them and say it's unhealthy for someone if they don't have at least 1 or 2 superstitions. And so he would throw salt over his head, when he'd spill the salt. And he'd never let us open an umbrella in the house and stuff. And he just arbitrarily said, I'm going to choose if I'm going to be superstitious, I'm going to be superstitious about unimportant things. So don't open an umbrella in the house. It's bad luck. But anyway, I've sort of done the same thing. And I said, I decided that, look, I'm a very open-minded person. I don't feel that I'm prejudiced against, knowingly prejudiced against any religion or race or culture or self-identity. I'm very accepting. But I thought, like my dad, it's going to be unhealthy if I'm not bigoted against something. So I chose the Hittites. Because I know nothing about the Hittites. They're a long dead civilization. They can't fight back. I'm going to insult no living Hittite. I hope. So long ago, as a conscious magical act, I've become a Hittite bigot. And so whenever the word Hittite comes up, or Hittite pottery or anything else, I always go, God damn Hittites. And it probably has some kind of genetic reincarnation, something going, but it's a joke, okay? It's a running gag in the DuQuette family that I get mad when you bring up Hittites. Well, but that's a digression. I'm sorry. What's wrong with the Hittites? The Babylonians, the Minoans, didn't they also build great cities and monuments? Didn't their armies conquer their neighbors? Didn't their religions also spread with commerce and the sword? Why have so many of us who may otherwise exhibit no inclination to study ancient civilizations become enamored with the mysteries of Egypt? And the answer, in my opinion, is one word: magic. Egypt, and Constance says art, and of course I say all art is magic. Egypt certainly didn't corner the market on magic. Magic permeated nearly every aspect of life in all the cultures of the ancient world, including the Hittites, including the goddamn Hittites. We know a great deal about the magical practices of the Babylonians. We know what gods they invoked for victory and love and battle, and what demons they evoked to torment their neighbors. These are practical skills for practical people. And from what we know about the ancient Egyptians, they too were a practical people. But apart from a rich pantheon of deities, local and national, and obligatory domestic superstitions, Egyptian magic appears to have been dominated by their funeral industry. Perhaps this is a distorted perception of the truth, because so much of what we know about the Egyptians we've had to learn by examining the contents of their tombs. We'll probably never know the details of many daily activities of Egyptian life, simply because the remnants of that life have not been so heroically preserved. We owe a great deal to the mummy mills. After all, what other magico art form sets out to preserve its handiwork for eternity? Mystery schools disappear. Books and manuscripts turn to dust. Sacred languages die. Religions and whole civilizations perish without a trace. But a first-class Egyptian funeral is forever. We often hear that forever is a long time, but nothing could be farther from the truth. Time is nothing to forever. The Egyptian magicians who established and perpetuated the elaborate procedures for the dead did not do so to impress or to enlighten the curious minds of the future. They didn't put mummies on ice to await some cosmic awakening in the future. For them, the afterlife is a continuous now, just like life. And the age-old search for eternal life is really the quest to attain consciousness of the continuity of existence. Immortality is the prize for they who would achieve this state of consciousness. From this enlightened vantage point, one no longer counts the string of spiraling incarnations as separate or even sequential events of experience. Rather, they're perceived as projected concurrently. One wall-to-wall reenactment of a single master adventure with specific and recognizable characters, ordeals, and crisis points. These crises are initiations. And the cast of recurring characters who populate this personal epic are our initiating officers. The plot of the film Groundhog Day is not too far removed from this concept. The main character, played by Bill Murray, repeatedly awakens on the same day and is required to master a succession of personal ordeals that can only be overcome by perfecting aspects of his own character. By doing so, he becomes an initiate and eventually achieves illumination and steps off the incarnational wheel. The formula of initiation is universal, and Masonry certainly hasn't cornered the market. Let's see here. As a matter of fact, this would be a perfect place to stop with that idea of Bill Murray, because part two of the talk here is called "Wanna Be a Member," which is a quote from the old Betty Boop bimbo cartoon. Not that Betty Boop was a bimbo. Bimbo's another character. Or maybe she was. Anyway, it's if you haven't seen Bimbo's Initiation, Google it on YouTube and watch Bimbo's Initiation. And then you'll understand what I'm going to say tomorrow when we start off with part two, Wanna Be a Member. Until then, now I have to get ready for another event tonight and tomorrow night. I'm talking about Tarot and Kabbalah and the Thoth Tarot to my Chinese audience. And I got to get ready for that. Maybe. What's that, dear?
I sneezed.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is... The wind blew the door shut. Oh! Well, tomorrow morning for Saturday morning cartoons, I hope you will all have watched Bimbo's Initiation. Okay. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.